Hello everyone, welcome to Introduction to Ecology. Today we're going to be discussing the different levels of ecology. In the last video, we talked about all levels of biology. In this one, we're just talking about ecology. So what is ecology? So ecology is the study of interactions between organisms and their living and non-living components of their environments. So how an organism interacts with other living organisms, their communities, and the non-living interactions of their environment, the non-living components. So interdependence is a really key theme in ecology, which is how species interact with each other and non-living environments and other species. And interdependence, this is a key theme in ecology because it can show how one change can affect all the species in an ecosystem. And we're going to go over an example next, in the next slide. So here we can't survive without photosynthesis because we breathe in the oxygen that trees and grass and photosynthetic organisms produce. And they take in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. So here's the example I was telling you about here. Here we see an increase in acorn production by oak trees. So oak trees are growing big and strong enough and they're creating a lot of acorns. Those acorns are going to fall down and the deer and the mice are going to feed on them. And that creates an increase in population of deer and mice. And with that increase in population in deer and mice, we start getting an increased population of ticks because they feed off the deer and mice, which then the ticks carry Lyme disease, which can create an increased cases of Lyme disease in humans due to tick bites, ticks going onto humans and biting them. So this is an example of interdependence. The increase in acorn production accidentally caused this. Now, was it the oak tree's fault? No. It was just doing what an oak tree is going to do. But because the acorn production increased, it caused deer and mice to increase, and deer and mice increase caused ticks to increase, and ticks carry Lyme disease. So here we have an ecological model which can predict an ecosystem such as this pond and how they respond to disturbances. So we can use these to predict, plan, and evaluate and test. So here we see in A that we know the birth and death rate of minnows, the birth and death rate of bass, how the effect of the minnows are on the bass, and how the effect of the bass are on the minnows. And we can predict that if there's a disturbance such as a disease that affects the minnows, how it affects the number of bass. However, this can't account for every variable in an ecosystem. There's a lot. And what happens when you introduce new variables like krill? Or when you introduce another new variable like a invasive species like tilapia or crawdads into a non-native, like the biggest example is tilapia in Lake Mead or crawdads in Lake Tahoe. They're both very invasive species, but it completely affects the ecosystem there. So we're going to now start talking about levels of organization. We recognize that there's a hierarchy of organization in the environment. So we have biosphere, ecosystems, communities, populations, and organisms. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the biosphere. The biosphere is all of the Earth and the atmosphere that supports life. And then so that is the broadest we can go. Then we can go to the ecosystem. Then we can go to the community, and then the population, and then the organism, because the organism is just one thing, one organism. So here, the biosphere is the broadest, most inclusive level of organization. It's the volume of the Earth and its atmosphere that supports life. So here, ecosystems, the biosphere is composed of many different ecosystems, which are smaller units. And they can include all organisms and the non-living environment found in a particular place. Now, this is important to know because an ecosystem can be large as a biome or small as like the underside of a rock. So this particular picture that we have here, we can look at this and we have a waterfall, we have a pond or a lake, we have rocks, we have the trees, we have moss, we have different plants, we have animals that live in the water, animals that live not in the water, we have bacteria. So there's lots of different things in that ecosystem right there. So they can come in various sizes or scales. We can have a small area underneath a rock, a decaying tree trunk, a pond, a biome, so an entire rainforest, an aquarium, or a terrarium, as is the case in our classroom. Our snake lives in her own little ecosystem. So different types of biomes, we'll talk about the terrestrial ones. We have a tropical rainforest, desert, tundra, chaparral, or Mediterranean grassland, temperate grassland or prairie, tropical grassland or savanna, taiga, boreal forest, and temperate forest with temperate forest deciduous trees. We also have the aquatic, which is the freshwater and the marine. We have oceans, wetlands, which is land and water together, estuaries, which is a mix of saltwater and freshwater, rivers and lakes, and each of those are going to have its own communities and populations that live there, and they're going to have its own interactions between the living and the non-living in parts of their environment. Take an estuary, for example. It is salt and freshwater, so very specific organisms can live there. People, normal organisms that live in marine areas, normal organisms that live in freshwater, they normally can't live there. Communities, populations, and organisms. A community is all the interacting populations living in an area. Below that level, we have populations, which is all the individuals of one particular species, so one species being the key word there, in a given area. And then organisms, one single member of the population. So let's go with our school as an example. The organisms there is either you, your neighbor, me, the snake in our classroom, the tarantula in room 1007. Those are organisms. A population would be the entire human population at our school, the entire snake population, which I believe is just one, the entire goldfish population, the entire tarantula population, which is probably more than just one. Those are populations. And then we have communities with how they interact with each other. Now, for example, communities interact in very interesting ways. They can be positive and negative to each other. So, no matter whether you like it or not, there's going to be mice or rats in schools. But how the communities interact with each other, that can create some interesting predicaments. So, for example, if a human sees a rat, the human is going to retaliate by setting traps, by making sure doors are closed, by making sure all trash is thrown away. And those are going to be doing things to decrease the numbers of rats getting into the school. Where the rats are going to try not to be seen, they're going to try to eat the food that the humans leave behind. It's going to find and create nests and try to meet with other rats to make baby rats, and then to continue living in the school. So that's how they interact with each other. Next time we're going to be talking about habitats and how humans live, or how populations live where they do, and why. See you next time.